Hey everyone, hope you're all doing well. I wanted this video to be longer, but it's my birthday tomorrow on the 17th, so I decided to take a bit of a rest from working today and have tomorrow off. I was gonna say, just enjoy good times that you have with people, because you really don't know how many you're gonna have, and I always struggle to enjoy things I do or appreciate them, because for some reason I don't really see a point in a lot of the things that I celebrated, but I've realised more in time that you really need to appreciate them, because you don't know how many you're going to have, and every day that goes by you get older really, and the future isn't guaranteed, so enjoy the things that you do have and enjoy, it's really important. But I hope you're all doing great. I love you and enjoy these stories. And make sure you check out the podcast in the description and my Instagram at Joe the Insomniak. I'm a child of the mountains and my hometown was completely mountainous, so I spent most of my childhood running through the forests and stuff, and one event that happened when I was 10 remains unexplained. I was on top of the ridge several hundreds of feet above my house when I started hearing my biological father yelling. In a very redneck area, he had a very distinct voice with no accent, so it's not really possible to confuse him for anyone else. His voice was coming from the other side of the ridge, which is a bit weird in retrospect because nobody over that way actually lived in that area and everyone avoided everyone in there. Even when hunting, we'd go around, the train was worse to deal with, but it's what we done. He starts calling my name, so I go down there. But the voice isn't getting any closer. I start feeling dread washing over me, and I suddenly remember my father's on a trip to Germany. I've never ran so fast. I didn't realise it until I got to the other side of the ridge, but the forest had been completely silent on the other side of the ridge, which never happens unless there's predators or the wind picks up. Normally, I'd think I was just getting closer to black bear territory, but the voice obviously makes it confusing. Unlike a number of stories like this I've heard over the years, the experience didn't really stop me from going into the woods. It just made me more curious. I've never had an explanation for it since, and it kind of worries me. The closest thing I've heard it could be is like a skinwalker, but I'm not sure. It may even be a person who is trying to stalk me in, but I guess I'll never know. Hey everyone. About 2 weeks ago, I had a really scary experience and my husband didn't believe me, but last night, he had a very similar experience and now we're both wondering what we could have possibly seen. So our puppy was barking to go outside and use the bathroom. It's about 4 or 5 AM. I took him out and stood on the steps of our deck because I didn't want to get my feet wet. My dog was using the bathroom when I looked up and I see something across the yard. It was slowly walking towards me, one step at a time. Its eyes were super reflective. I thought it was a deer, but its eyes were so tall and staring at me, and it wasn't running away. I hurried the dog up and we ran inside. I have reoccurring night terrors, so at first, my husband thinks it's just that, but I was crying and shaking and could barely be spoken to. He tells me it's probably a deer, but I wasn't convinced, and I refused to take the dog out after midnight again. As for my husband's experience, it was early in the morning, about 5 AM. The dog was barking and he took him outside. Once again, my husband stood on the deck outside. He didn't have his glasses, but when he looks up, he saw something tall standing in the forest near our backyard. He said he saw it walking slowly, almost gliding. He said that the moment he made eye contact, his nose was bleeding. My husband is typically not prone to them either. He said he wanted to get a closer look but felt the need to go inside, almost like an instinct. My husband's a zookeeper. He's not really afraid of animals and can recognize many of them. I still have no idea what this is. We live in Eastern PA. This happened around the 1900s in the countryside of South Brazil. My grandmother's grandfather was coming home from a ball very late at night. He lived in a small farm, and so to come from the party place he had a long way to walk in the middle of nothing, with just trees and bushes. And well, you can imagine how the countryside of Brazil was, especially back then. He said that while he was walking, all of a sudden he heard strange noises and lights. Scared, he hid in the bushes to see what was happening. He said there were very little men speaking in a foreign language. Behind him, there was two huge plates stacked on top of another, with lights all over them. He stayed hiding and praying until they left and ran for his life. My grandmother says that she's heard this story a few times in her youth from him, and the narrative always stayed the same, with him praying after. Only after she married and moved to the big city and had children did she start to hear about these things being known as aliens and other things. Her grandfather at the time would have had no concept of aliens. After a heavy night of drinking and camping, we woke up and nobody wanted to make breakfast, so we decided to drive into town and find a diner. We're approaching where the dirt meets the pavement and come up on dozens of sheriffs backloading the road, two of which have rifles pointed towards us. We stop the truck about 40 feet from them and hear them yell over the intercom to stick our hands up now. They then instruct us to approach on foot with our hands in the air. They search my truck and find it full of loaded guns and beer. That's when they tell us that a Forest Service agent had been shot and killed nearby, and eventually let us go, but tell us our camping gear is out of bounds until the murderer is found. We didn't want to leave our camping gear and go home, so we ended up at a nearby casino, continuing partying there. A few hours later, someone in the casino says there's loads of cops outside. We go outside and there must have been 100 sheriffs, local PD everywhere. Apparently, that same murderer had stopped at the casino gas station and an officer recognized him. Then LEO drew his gun, murderer went for his and the LEO shot him dead. We went back to the camp and home the next day. I checked the newspaper articles and they made a map of where the murder happened, and it's only 200 yards away from our campsite. I have a friend who's a trail ranger. He's basically a ranger who can't get you in trouble. He told me about this time he was gathering illegally placed wildlife cameras and knocking them down and whatnot. The other ranger wasn't feeling well, so he said he was going to head back, but it's a 1-hour ATV ride. My friend finished up the last one when he hears voices. He kept in mind that he's far off the beaten path. He calls out and no one replies. As it was getting dark, he starts to head back and found his ATV won't start. He then realizes that the batteries are not connected. He reconnects it and started to drive but isn't going fast. Less than half a mile later, the whole thing died. He radioed back saying, "Hey guys, someone pick me up." They said they would do it but are gonna take an hour. He said, "Can the other guy come back?" and he said no. So he settled down, made a small fire, but heard voices again. It's dark and he's angry. The voices sound like an argument now. Someone was angry, yelling at someone else who sounded scared. He called out and said, "Does anyone need help?" The voices don't care. He thinks they're less than 1,000 feet away. He radioed again, and they said they're having trouble finding what path he'd be on. and haven't left yet. He said to them just to get another ranger there. About 3 minutes go by and the voices start again. He decides to walk there, hoping maybe there's some drunk people that have a map. He walks in their direction, but the voices seem to be getting further away as he got closer. Finally, 20 minutes later, he gave up and walks back. He got a radio call, and they said the other guy was passed out, covered in vomit, and was taken to hospital. They don't know exactly where I come from still, because he crossed off everywhere that he went. Then the radio died, and the voices came back. Bored out of his mind, he decides to listen to what they're arguing about, and picks up on things like, "Well, it wasn't yours to take, and I knew you were gonna do this, you idiot, and I don't care." His guess is that 2 hunters are arguing over a kill. Then he heard something intelligible. Then silence. Bang. A gunshot. He doused his fire and hid. After that he heard nothing. Just his breathing for the next half hour until he saw ATV lights. He told the guy picking him up everything, and they called back. They had people looking for 3 hours but found nothing. They came back the next day with police and dogs. After about an hour, a shallow grave was found, and a man who'd been shot in the head was also found. Thing was, it was a skeleton who had been there for years, so either the argument he heard was somehow from the past, or someone else got murdered recently when he was there. This happened while I was doing my army service in Switzerland. I'm not allowed to talk about exactly what we were doing there, but I'll try and keep this clear. My company has installed a huge antenna, and it has to be guarded day and night. So we're on a hill, away from a city near a massive forest. It's 1800 hours, and I had just started my watch of 6 hours with another soldier. Everything's fine. We smoke cigarettes and keep ourselves occupied until our night watch ends. Then, we receive a call from our superior who said that one of the soldiers that's supposed to watch hasn't come out, and we have to stay for another 6 hours. So we tossed a coin to see who's going to stay from midnight till 6 AM with temperatures of -20. And of course I lost. And I had to wait for the other soldiers to come and join me for the rest of the night. They sent Jon Snow. No, I'm just kidding. They've only sent another soldier, but not the best, because I knew he would sleep all night when I saw him climbing the hill with his sleeping bag. And that's what he did. He immediately took place in the tent and fell asleep. It was the coldest and longest night of my life. Nothing special about it. The weirdest part though happened in the morning. We received another call from our superior telling us that we had an NBC exercise. It means that we have to wear all-day chemical suits. The one with the gas mask and everything. I was really upset and exhausted because I wasn't able to sleep with that thing on, and sleep was my only reward for the 12-hour watch. Well, I get out of this tent, and I saw this thing that still scares me to this day. I see a woman standing next to the antenna. She wasn't moving, she was just standing there, meters from my tent. I couldn't see her face because of the sun starting to rise behind her. I knew she's a woman because she had really long hair. Remember that we're in the middle of nowhere and she's standing there, not moving, like she's frozen. I start to freak out and call the other guy to see what I'm looking at. I don't know why, but he wasn't scared at all, and he told her to leave. But she didn't. She just stood there staring at us. I was confused. How could a woman ignore 2 soldiers in a forbidden area? I mean, we're in Switzerland. The army's not that impressive, I know, but people usually don't do this kind of thing. They would just move away, especially when it's 6 in the morning. And what she's doing in the middle of nowhere is beyond me, not dressed for cold climate. How long was she there? And how did she get there? I don't even see any footsteps. So, there's so many questions running through my head. The other soldier didn't think twice and starts walking towards her. When he almost reaches her, she starts running very fast into the forest. I see her going deep into the forest and I never see her again. I'm a really rational thinker, but I have absolutely no explanation for this. Thank God there was someone there with me, because nobody would have believed me if it was just me there at that time. My father told me a story many times when I was growing up of something that happened to him. I know he believes it to be true, and he's not a very superstitious person whatsoever. Very analytical on the other hand. My dad was 5 years old, camping with the Boy Scout troop. They sent everyone for firewood. It was dusk, so he went off on his own and a little further than the other kids. He wanted to gather more firewood than anyone else. He got far enough away that nobody else had picked through the fallen wood and started gathering. Along his way, he went until he almost stepped on a tiny tribe of Indians, moving around a fire, dancing. He said they were tiny, and they didn't pay him any attention as he crouched down to look at them. He ran over to go and tell his friends, but by the time he come back, they're all gone. He said he's never seen anything like it in his life, and he was sure someone was playing a prank on him, but how? How could somebody make a prank look that real? I live near a very large, very popular national park. Locals here, like myself, are pretty aware of the goings on here. Strange sounds, weird creatures, and strange disappearances. I've dealt with these in my past times and hikes, and even just relaxing in the park. Here's one that still freaks me out to this day. I was at my grandma's house that's deep in the Bonnies, and the only road there is a gravel road that's washed away. Without a good car, you're not getting anywhere. My cousins lived in a trailer with their mums, right below my grandma's. We played all sorts of games, which mainly involved me getting chased, being the youngest. My grandma was in hospital with my aunt, so our oldest cousin, who I'll call D, had to watch us. D was, and still is, the only cousin that's older than us that we still hold in high regards. He would mess with us and play around, but actually cared about us. The whole day we were playing around, but we would usually play more at night, like hide and seek, etc. We'd been playing pretty far away from the house and it was starting to get dark. We decided to go back to the house and grab flashlights and play manhunt. Of course, I was the one being hunted. So I ran pretty far into the woods on the other side of the property, hiding behind a log. I heard my cousins getting closer, so I ran and they saw me. We ended up running to the very back of the property line, and we saw my cousin D. He looked at us and kinda growled. We all ran from him, thinking it's a game. We ran back to the gravel road when we saw him walk out of the tree line, but he did in a weird way, gloatingly in fact. We ran into the house and decided to barricade the door to play a prank on him. We moved a couple of things in front of the door, but decided to move the big coffee table in front of it too. As we loudly scooted the table, they come into the living room from the bedroom. We had obviously woke him up, and we said we saw him chasing us, and he got wide-eyed. He said stay in the bedroom. We sat in the bedroom for about 20 minutes, and he come in and told us not to worry, that he's just scaring us. It wasn't until 4 years later, when I was 13, he told me the truth. He's pretty certain that it was a skinwalker. He told me he's dealt with it before and was terrified it hunted us, and he was too scared to tell me at the time because I'd get worried. So with a few fraternity brothers and I, are backpacking in the Nafala National Park and met some guys. They're locals. I mean, not local hangout bros, but local backwoods people who lived there for generations, hate the government and society types. These are guys that have apparently been helping Eric Rudolph, the Olympic bomber, hide in the national forest by supplying him with food drops. Really weird drunken conversations. They actually took us to one of the hideout drop-off caves. They were too serious, and that's the whole reason that I hated this. They trusted us because some things were said to make them think we're of a similar mindset. Anyway, we parted ways. Spent a few days trying to figure out if it is all lies or not. And that same week, they call Eric Rudolph in the dumpster of a Piggly Wiggly 3 miles from where we met the guys. Every single thing these guys said matched up with the news story. We gave them the bottle of Jack even. They said they'd give it to Eric. Creepy as hell. Hauntingly terrifying in retrospect. So when I was about 5 years old, I was at my sister's graduation party. My father had rented out a pavilion at a heavy wooded area of Country Park. I ended up following some kids throughout the forest, and after a while, I realised I wandered too far from the pavilion and started heading back. I remember not being able to find my way back and ended up being lost for around an hour. As I was walking, a man dressed in white from head to toe appeared to me. He said his name was John. I explained to him that I was lost and told him where my family was. I remember him accompanying me throughout the woods, and he had a very comforting presence about him. After a while, I remembered hearing my uncles calling for me from a distance. I turned to tell John that that's my uncle, but he was gone. I turned the other way, and there was my uncle. I'm 30 now, but can't help wonder exactly what John was and what the meaning of all of this was. I guess I'll write what happened in chronological order. To preface this, I should mention that all of this took place back on my reservation. I'm from Algonquin First Nation from Canada. Another thing I should mention is that on the res, traditional beliefs and legends of the paranormal are still a big part of our community. The attitude of most people towards the paranormal is one of assurance. To us, the paranormal is a regular part of our life. We believe in a spirit world, and we believe that sometimes these beings can cross over from their world to ours. Well, I tell paranormal stories to my non-native friends. They're always in disbelief of what I tell them, but they've had no paranormal experiences, unlike me having a bunch, and most everyone I know on the res has had one. I don't really care to explain it, but it is what it is. Anyway, here's the story. This happened in the fall of 2011 when I was 16 years old. I was living in a nearby city with my mum, so I can get a better education than the one I can get at home. But we'd go back every single week to see my dad and little brother. One Friday, during the drive back home, I got a text from a friend of mine. She told me about a party that was happening that night, and she said to me, when am I going to be home so they can pick me up? I gave her a time, and that was that. When we got home, as soon as we stepped inside the house, I see my dad and cousins sitting at the kitchen table drinking. They're both cops on the res, so usually beers with his partner on a Friday evening happens. Means that they had a particularly tough week at work though. Typically, the toughest cases they deal with are ones around children. So a part of me felt sad immediately that something bad's happened. They both look tired and drained, but they're happy to see us. We say our greetings, catch up a little, and my dad asked me if I have any plans. I tell him about the party and where it'll be, and he and our cousin share a weird look. "Why are you guys making that face? Did something happen?" I say. "I dunno, should we tell her?" my cousin said, looking at my dad. He laughed and said, "Yeah, we probably should, because I'm gonna have to be going to a cottage pretty deep in the woods later that evening." They start off by saying the first strange call they get is on a Monday night. There's an elderly woman saying that there's people outside of her home knocking on all of her windows. She can't see anyone, but there must have been at least 3 people, judging by all the different locations of the knocking. They arrive at the woman's home, inspect all around the house, even the woods, but find nothing. They tell her that it's probably some teenagers playing tricks on her, but sadly there's nothing they can do really, besides patrol the area in case they come back. On Wednesday night, the same woman called again with the same problem. It had been raining that day too, and there was mud everywhere, so they figure at least they're gonna know where they went. But they don't find a thing. This is when they start feeling like something is off, because one of the windows where the woman was, she's adamant that there was someone there, but it's completely impossible to get there without going through a huge puddle. This is when they start to think she's lying, but they just told her the same thing they told her friend a few nights prior. By Thursday night, everyone on the res had been talking about these strange experiences. It turns out that she wasn't the only one experiencing it. She was just the one to call. I mean, all of this is taking place on a res, so it wasn't long before people were linking it to the supernatural. My dad still wasn't sure if it's just a group of teens playing a prank on people, but they get another call from the same woman for the same reason. They rush over there, but are met with the same situation, except this time, the neighbour walked over looking pale as a ghost. That's saying something for him. He says, "Is this about the knock-in?" They notice he's a little shaky. "Yeah. Did you see something?" they ask him, and he nods and said, "You guys are gonna think I'm crazy, but yeah." And he goes on to explain what he saw. He said he stepped out for a cigarette on his front porch when he heard knocking. He looked around to see where it's coming from, and when he looked to his neighbour's house, he saw it. There's a black figure standing outside of the woman's window. The same one with the puddle, looking at her home. He said it looked humanoid in stature, but completely made out of a shadow. You could tell it was something solid-ish, but you cannot make out any features on it. He stared at it completely in shock, and watched that thing as it knocked a couple of times, then darted around the house knocking on every window, moving so quick it's like a blur, and it went around the house a few times. The man ran across the road into the tree line, behind one tree in particular. The man was frozen but couldn't look away. It then leaned out from behind the tree, staring directly at him with yellow eyes that reflected the light similar to a cat's, and then it smiled, showing its small but numerous pointed sharp teeth. "I almost had a heart attack," he said while it happened. Fast forward to Friday. Stories are being exchanged all over the res about sightings and experiences people are having. On top of that, multiple people are experiencing the knock-in. There's also quite a few sightings with everyone describing the creature in the same way. One woman was bringing her trash to the side of the road, and she thought she saw the woman somewhere in her peripheral vision standing near the trees. She walks back up the driveway and into her home, feeling as though she's being watched. Right before she's about to open her door to go back inside to her home, she looked back and saw 2 reflective yellow eyes staring at her from the trees, saying it's about 5 feet above the ground. Another couple was driving at night and said they saw a humanoid figure too. "You sure you still want to go to that party?" my dad asked. But my friends were already pulling into the driveway. I gave my family hugs and kisses goodbye, and they told me to be careful, but I felt fine. A common belief among native people is that negative energy attracts negative energy. Therefore, an evil spirit will draw to people with unresolved issues, traumas, and sinners, I suppose. If you're someone who's spiritual, self-aware, and basically a good person, you're pretty good. So I get to the party, and within 20 minutes, the conversation shifts towards the paranormal experiences everyone's having. I'm really curious about what everyone has to say, because they have stories that I haven't heard yet, but my friend, being 17 and all, couldn't hold her alcohol very well, and was crying about how she wishes she was closer with her brother. I'm trying to make her feel better while listening to everyone else's stories. One of the people from the party was related to the neighbour of the woman who was calling the police. The experience really shook him up, and my friend was just explaining everything that was going on. For one, he smudged his entire home, which is something people do for extra protection from the paranormal. He also went on multiple visits to the elders around the community asking for advice. What we do know about paranormal experiences on the res is that they don't happen as much as they used to. If you talk to one of our elders, they'll have endless stories and even more advice to give about how to protect yourself. One of the explanations that was given to us is that the shadow guy is evidence that someone was doing unauthorized shaky tent ceremony. If you don't know what that is, it's basically like an Ouija board session that takes place inside of a tent. People stand around the tent while the medicine man or medicine woman goes inside asking questions. The tent begins to shake and you hear voices of the spirits coming through. I've never personally been to one because we haven't had a good enough reason to make one, but typically our ancestors use shaken tent ceremonies when they're starving in the dead of winter and need some direction on where the nearest food is. My mum's been to one. Her story's crazy. She described hearing multiple men and women only speaking native tongue, and they're upset that people were doing a shaken tent ceremony when they're not on the verge of death. The people there had to explain that they're only doing the ceremony to prove that it was real, as we'd been losing our culture as a result of residential schools. But the spirits are angry, saying that the bridge between the two worlds should never be opened unless necessary, because you don't know who you're talking to. It could be evil spirits. You don't know. Anyway, the elders told him that this spirit crossed over into our world because of a shaken tent ceremony. Someone on the res has been doing them without consultation of the elders, so we start thinking about who would do that without the proper guidance, and so. Then, two of the drunkest dudes say, "Oh, I'm not scared. That thing can't do anything," basically egging it all on, and we're all looking at each other like, why would you disrespect an evil spirit? That's exactly how it's attracted to you. And that's when I decided to leave the sunroom where everyone's hanging out. I went to the living room to console my drunk crying friend when I noticed the rocking chair outside of the porch moving. I slowly moved away, refusing to make direct eye contact, but I do in my peripheral vision. Anyway, I'm inside the cottage and I keep seeing this rocking chair moving back and forth. But another thing we're raised to do in our culture is to ignore paranormal. Spirits feed on energy people give towards them, so if you freak out, if you get angry, if you start crying or yell at it, that's exactly what it wants. It thrives on energy of any kind. So while I knew something messed up was happening, I wasn't about to pay attention. 5 minutes now go by and I still see it out the corner of my eye. That's when my friend screams and she runs on the other side of the sunroom. My other friend, too, sprints to the girl, number 1, who's sitting and busts through the French doors onto the balcony. All of this happens in a split second, but I immediately go to the patio and ask what's going on. Girl 1 is crying on the couch with friends all around her. She claims to have seen the spirit. She said she was listening to the boys talk about the spirit when she saw boy 2's face as he was looking onto the balcony behind her. She turned around to see what he's looking at, and directly on the other side of the window was a shadow spirit on the rocking chair smiling at her, literally 3 feet away from her. That's when boy 2 sprinted towards it and burst through the French doors. I walk outside to find boy 2, and he's on the lawn, staring into the woods. I call his name and he looks up. All he says is, "Get everyone inside," and the tone of his voice makes me scared. I get all of us inside the cottage. This is when the phrase, "Come at me, bro," was gaining popularity. So you can imagine the drunk kid yelling that into the woods. It's terrible. I eventually get everyone inside. Boy 2 comes inside and tells everyone to clean up and that we should leave as soon as possible. Everyone has trash bags and we're clearing away the beer cans and whatever. Everyone goes inside the cottage and it's only me and boy 2 in the sunroom now. I look to him for answers and he says, "It's outside." I nod and start cleaning faster. The sooner we're out of here, the sooner we get away from that thing. As we're cleaning in the sunroom, we hear knocking on multiple windows. The entire sunroom's made of glass, but it's dark out, so you can't even see. And he says ignore it. I'm really scared now. Within 2 seconds, someone comes running out of the bathroom and says, "I'll kill whoever's knocking on the bathroom window." But everyone's accounted for. Someone else comes running out of the bedroom saying that there was knocking on the window as well. Everyone's freaking out, and me and boy 2 and our one other friend are the only sober ones now trying to calm people. We get the place clean and get outside and to the cars immediately. Everyone's getting into the trucks and I'm standing there. The guy looks relaxed, then all of a sudden looks worried and shoves me inside his truck. We peel out of there quick. A few days later, I end up hanging out with boy 2 and he tells me the story from his perspective. He said that when the boys started talking about the spirit, it appeared on the rocking chair behind girl 1. He said he made eye contact with it but couldn't look away. They were staring at each other, and that's when girl 1 and boy 2's expression changed. He said it was instinct to defend the people he's with and ran towards it. He said that the feeling he was getting from the cockgee was almost like daring him to do something. He said the second he got up, the cockgee stood up and ran into the woods, disappearing into a blur of the tree line. Boy 2 ran off the porch, looking around the lawn when he saw it standing there, right next to the woods. It was smiling at him, and he heard it mocking him, calling his name, then disappearing. He didn't see it again until everyone was getting inside the trucks, which explains why he suddenly pushed me inside. He said it was standing on the far end of the truck, super close to us. Later that night, when he dropped everyone off, they realized that they never locked the doors. So he went back to the cottage, but his friend was too scared to go in, so he goes in on his own. But the second he opens the door, he sees that thing standing inside. He locks the door as quick as he can, and they peel out of there. The sightings continued for a few days after that. We definitely weren't the only people on the res to have them kind of experiences. It was the talk of the res. Everyone was curious about what happened. Would it come back? What was it? All I know is that it terrified us, and it's 2018 now, and no one else has seen anything like it since.